Hello, and welcome to today's American Flyer Trains to kick off the rebuild of 370, the GM or General Motors American Flyer GP-7 switcher, manufactured by the A.C. Gilbert Company from 1950 to 1953. This one is a Type 2 and it is customer owned. In this video, I'll focus on just the general description of this piece, this particular type, maybe some known issues that will be addressed during the rebuild, and some other interesting facts about this train. As most of you are probably aware, when these trains, when the 370s were produced, link couplers, of course, were in use. Now, this one is a Type 2 where the link coupler bar, which was only used in these earlier trains, were inserted directly into the vertical members of the steps right here on either side. In the earlier and previous Type 1 model, the link couplers, these link coupler bars were inserted into a thick mounting tab right here, but on this Type 2 have been omitted. Now, these locomotives also had dummy trucks with sheet metal frames. Now, you should find these on Type 2, and possibly on some of the earlier versions of a Type 1, you'd find that these dummy trucks are die-cast. Double worm drive motor powers the four-wheel front truck, so nothing unusual there, and it also comes with the four-position reverse unit. Therefore, I don't suspect that this is going to be anything but a standard rebuild, maybe a little bit easier in some respects because all these wheels are contact wheels. There will be no pull mores. As a matter of fact, this predates the pull more, the implementation of the pull mores on diesels. The catalog number 370 right here appears on an illuminated white plastic number board that has square corners. So it's on both sides, actually on both ends, on both sides of the locomotive shell. Some of the known issues that I identified during this initial disassembly and a cursory overview of the train, or that may have been identified by others as well, include just the normal and typical household dirt or dust on the shell. I don't see any evidence of any finger wear. I've actually worked on diesels and steam locomotives where you can actually see where the thumb was usually placed and maybe the palm of the hand on top and four fingers on one side. This one doesn't have any kind of wear shown like that from just the typical oils coming off the human hand. So either it was well treated by its owner, or it's just a statement of the paint job that was on here. The decals are in, I think, very good condition. Only minor chipping on both sides. I don't think it warrants replacement. Some of the horizontal surfaces definitely have the household dirt and dust on top of them, as well as the exhaust or vent fans and the exhaust positions. So those will be cleaned out. More than likely, I'll be using cold water on this with a soft brush just to release things from things like these grates right here, which surprisingly can produce quite a bit of dust, or hold quite a bit of dust. Upon the initial review and disassembly, I discovered that the handrail or fence end assembly had bent screws, and I've already replaced those two bent screws. As you can see here, I'll be painting these, by the way, with two American Flyer S171 screws, which should be the exact same screw as right here. The ones that were in here appear to have been seated by someone and then over tightened to the point of actually bending the screw head in an awkward position. So I removed those and replaced them to make sure we had a good stable connection with the fence. The link coupler bar on one end of the end rail assembly was missing and had been replaced by the owner with a manufactured one, probably manufactured from just a coat hanger. So this one is fine. It's a little chipped, but that's okay. It's going to happen because there's a lot of activity along this link coupler bar, and I've already straightened this one out. This one was distorted, but I've already secured a replacement on this end from a vendor. So I'll be using this remanufactured piece to replace one end's link coupler bar. The reverse unit is typically very dirty. It's difficult to operate or move manually. Therefore, according to my standards, I'll be completely disassembling it, cleaning, polishing, and then reassembling. Now, that will include removal of both the upper and lower fingerboards, and also the removal of the drum. I'll wash and polish the drum, but before I put it back and the fingerboards back, I will ensure and clean the interior of the reverse unit thoroughly, especially the lift plate that moves the pawl that actually operates the drum. To make sure of freedom of movement, I'll make sure it's lubricated with CRC 226, and I'll make sure the surfaces have CRC 226. While I have the fingerboards removed, I will check the fingers' lateral or horizontal stability and position, as well as their downward tension. And I'll check the fingertips for proper formation of the tip and for holes. And I will check to make sure that they, too, are properly lubricated with CRC 226. And this is a good place versus, say, on a contact wheel, where you can use CRC 226 to enhance the electrical flow. The chassis deck is very dirty and dusty, as you can see. So this is just typical household dirt and dust. It almost looks like snow. I don't think it is, but you can see I can scratch it off a little bit with this stick. But it'll all be thoroughly washed and cleaned before it's reassembled. There is the very much expected dirt, dust, fiber. I've already identified some what possibly look like carpet fibers, grease, oil, and carbon dust on this front motor. I don't expect that's going to be anything unusual, just the typical diesel motor rebuild, including the polishing of all the contact wheels, a total of 8 contact wheels on this unit. Speaking of contact wheels, several of the contact wheels are blackened to a point where they appear as almost as though they have pull more tires installed. In my initial review, I actually thought that because of the blackened condition of this wheel and this one. Upon cursory, quick glance review, I thought, well, gee, this is an awfully early version to have even a thin band pull more on there. And I was right, it's not on there. It's just so thick in carbon buildup, burn buildup, that it appears to be a pull more wheel or tire. One bulb on the back, or the non-cab end of the locomotive, is not illuminating. I think the wiring is okay. I've already inspected it, so I'll just be replacing the bulb. As is typical on these 370s, the reverse unit to motor rainbow wire is very tight. I'll be removing the weight, which will include this piece and this portion of it. It is a one-piece unit, by freeing a screw right here in the middle so that I can pull the weight. Now what that'll allow me to do is to take the rainbow wire out of this groove that's right here on top of the weight and reposition it further down, so then I can drop the motor down to an acceptable depth so that I can work on it. If necessary, I will detach the reverse unit so I can slide it up just a little bit to gain a little bit more freedom or slack in the rainbow wire, and that'll give me much more freedom to work on all the components of the motor. And that becomes a necessary part of this because the wire rests inside of this little groove in the top of the weight. To finish up, it is understood, and here's some other interesting facts. It's understood and found in unreferenced documentation, I just can't lay my fingers on it right now, that the 370 without this large weight over the power truck would derail in a curve after going down the grade on an over-under trestle set figure 8. Therefore, Gilbert engineers actually added this weight. Now others might say, well, and I did too, I thought the weight was there simply to give this front motor some of its early tractive force and it was needed just to hold it down, but I'm not so sure. If I get a chance, I'm actually going to operate this without the weight, because I think I'm going to acquire a 370, and I'd like to run it on my elevated railroad, which is mostly on trestles and bridges, and I might elect to remove the weight entirely or replace it with a smaller weight up on that elevated section, if in fact the weight is there to prevent the tipping over of the locomotive as it comes down a grade and hits a curve immediately. That's an interesting little fact. The early units on this particular 370 train had the non-powered trucks with a die-cast chassis for that truck. Very unusual. This one, of course, is not. It's sheet metal, as is the chassis itself. So you can imagine what this would look like if, in fact, it were die-cast. This locomotive preceded the addition of the slide, or also known as shoe contacts, on the side frame, so you won't find any. All your power pickup is going to be done by the 8 wheels, 4 on motor, 4 on the dummy truck. Should you add them to this? I don't think so. It doesn't have a horn assembly on this version of this type. I think in later types there was a horn installed, and it might be worthwhile, if they weren't already there, to put slide contacts to prevent a little crackling and popping in that sound mechanism to maintain the contact. You'll also notice on these collector truck assemblies, there is no coupler assembly whatsoever. Of course, we already know that the coupler is done by that link coupler bar that's on that front handrail piece. So there's no position or place without modification to put link or knuckle couplers. But again, later versions came with couplers. As an aside to that, and actually as a clarification, all these units, from my understanding, all these units were produced with link coupler bars. The knuckle couplers that you'll find on these were either a factory or post-factory modification or conversion that was done at some of the authorized service dealers. So they were initially produced with a link coupler bar, but either at the factory, knuckle couplers were added or replaced the link coupler bars, or they were done post-factory conversion at an authorized service dealer. Although it has no date stamp in the traditional format that we're used to, like a month name and a 2-digit year, or even, as a matter of fact, for the non-catalog sets that were alpha encoded, this one I found has 521 right here stamped on the interior of the shell. Now, there's no confirmation that this is in fact a date stamp, a bill date stamp, but I contend that there's a possibility it could represent January of 52. Now that would put this train into the year range in which it was made, and since I don't think it's ever been opened up by anybody but me, it's quite possible. I checked Digger and Doyle. Neither of them reference any type of coded bill date that looks like 3 digits. Yes, there is a 3 alpha letter designation on non-catalog trains that were used. So 52 matches one of the 2 build factory years, 50 and 52 for this train, that are referenced in Greenberg's American Flyer Price Guide. So that puts the approximate age of this piece at about 69 years, but of course it'll be rebuilt by Dave's American Flyer Trains in 2022. Thanks again for watching Dave's American Flyer Trains. So long, everyone.